She's already mine. Those were the 3 words my boss said into the microphone in front of 300 people, 2 news cameras, and the empty spot on that stage where my fiancé was supposed to be standing. I hadn't moved in 4 minutes. I know because I watched the second hand on the clock behind the bar tick 48 times while I stood at the edge of the grand ballroom at the Harrington Hotel, holding a champagne flute I hadn't touched, wearing a dress I'd paid 3 months of residence salary for, waiting for Marcus to walk through those doors. He didn't. What I got instead was a text. "I can't do this, Em. I'm sorry. Don't call me." 9 words. 4 years. Gone. The gala was the Children's Heart Foundation annual fundraiser, the biggest night on the hospital's calendar. Dr. Hayes had arranged for the engagement announcement to happen here because Marcus had insisted on it. "It'll be good for your career," he'd said. "People will see you differently when they know you're with me." I should have paid more attention to what that sentence revealed about him. About us. But I hadn't. I'd smiled and agreed and bought the dress and practiced what I would say when Dr. Hayes handed Marcus the microphone at 8 o'clock sharp, the way they'd planned. At 8:04, Marcus's name was still not on the arrival list at the front door. At 8:09, I read his text in the coat room, alone, with my back against a wall of fur coats and cashmere overcoats that smelled like other people's lives. At 8:12, I heard my colleague Priya say somewhere near the champagne station, "Wait, where's Marcus? Wasn't the announcement supposed to be 5 minutes ago?" And at 8:14, I heard my supervisor Dr. Feldman laugh and say, "Poor girl's been stood up." At her own engagement party, in front of the entire department, the murmur that followed was low and polished, the way gossip sounds when it's dressed in black tie. Someone near the window said he'd seen Marcus that afternoon loading bags into an Uber. Someone else said they'd heard he'd been transferred to a position in Austin 3 weeks ago and never told me. Phones were already out. I could see the glow of screens through the gap in the coat-room door. My best friend Jess found me 4 seconds later. She pushed through the door, took one look at my face, and said, "We're leaving. Right now. I'll get your coat." "There are 300 people out there," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like something being read aloud from very far away. "Half of them are my colleagues. The other half are donors who know my name because Dr. Hayes introduced me as I stopped." I pressed the back of my hand against my mouth. He introduced me as the most promising resident he'd worked with in a decade. And now I'm the woman whose fiancé disappeared before the engagement party ended. "Emma," Jess grabbed my arms, "none of this is your fault. It doesn't matter. It's still my humiliation." She didn't have an answer for that, because there wasn't one. We both knew what would happen. By tomorrow morning, the story would be on 3 different group chats. By Monday, it would have traveled through every department in the hospital. And every time I walked into a room for the next 6 months, I would be the woman who got left. Not the resident with the publication in the New England Journal. Not the doctor who'd pulled a 36-hour shift during the ice storm and saved 2 lives. Just the woman who wasn't enough to make a man stay. Dr. Vasquez. The voice came from just outside the coat room door. Quiet. Steady. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to carry across a room. I knew it immediately. "May I come in?" Jess looked at me. I nodded. Dr. Carter Hayes stepped into the coat room and closed the door behind him. He was still in his tux, his program folded in his left hand, his expression giving away absolutely nothing. He was 38 years old and had run the cardiothoracic department of Harrington Memorial for the last 4 years. I had worked for him for 3 of those years. I had never once seen him lose his composure. Not in a 48-hour surgery, not when administration cut his budget by 30%, not when his wife died 2 years ago and he came back to work after the funeral and operated for 11 hours straight. He looked at me now the same way he looked at every impossible situation, like he was already 3 steps into solving it. "How long have you known?" I asked. "That he was gone?" "About 6 minutes ago. Security flagged that he never checked in." He paused. "How are you?" "I've been better," I said. From the ballroom, I could hear the string quartet shifting awkwardly between songs, filling the silence where the announcement was supposed to be. I could hear voices rising, questions forming. Someone had started a rumor. I could feel it the way you feel a storm through a wall. "I need to go back out there," I said. Not because I wanted to, Because I was 29 years old and I had worked too hard for too long to let Marcus take one more thing from me than he already had. I need to just walk out there and let people see that I'm still standing. And then I need to get through the rest of tonight without crying in front of the department chief. Dr. Hayes looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and took out something small. He held it in his open palm and I stared at it, confused. It was a ring. Not enormous, not ostentatious. A simple diamond solitaire on a thin gold band, vintage, the kind of ring that looked like it had a whole history before tonight. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "She gave it to me 2 years ago, before she passed, and told me not to let fear make me stupid." He paused. "I've been carrying it for 7 months. I couldn't breathe. Emma." He said my name the way he said it when we were alone in the office reviewing charts, not the formal Dr. Vasquez of hallways and rounds. I know this is the worst possible moment. I know what I'm about to say is going to sound insane, and I know you have every right to tell me to put this back in my pocket and walk away. He closed his hand around the ring, then opened it again. "But there are 300 people on the other side of that door waiting for an engagement announcement. Your colleagues are out there, the donors who fund your research grants are out there, and you are in here. Alone. Because a man who never deserved you chose his fear over your future. Dr. Hayes." "Carter," he said. I blinked. "You've worked for me for 3 years," he said. "I think you can call me Carter." Carter. The name felt strange in my mouth. Real, in a way that nothing else in the last 20 minutes had. "You can't be suggesting what I think you're suggesting. I'm not going to let them do this to you." Something shifted in his face. The composure was still there, but underneath it was something else, something that looked like it had been waiting a long time to surface. "I've watched you for 3 years, Emma. I've watched you come in before sunrise and leave after midnight and never once ask for credit you deserved. I've watched Marcus come to pick you up and talk over you and dismiss your work like it was a hobby. And I've stood there and said nothing because you weren't mine to protect." He held out his hand, the ring in his palm. "But right now, in this moment, I'm asking you to let me." My heart was doing something I didn't have clinical language for. "This would be legal," I said, because my brain had apparently decided to handle crisis by defaulting to practical objections. "If we walk out there, and we'd actually be engaged." "Yes, to each other. That's typically how it works. You're my boss." "I'll fix that Monday morning," he said immediately. "I'll transfer your supervision to Dr. Feldman. You'll keep your position, your projects, your schedule. Nothing changes professionally except the chain of command." "You've thought about this." "I've thought about a great many things," he said quietly, "for a great many months." From the ballroom, I heard someone say my name. Not kindly. I looked at Carter Hayes, at this man who had seen me every day for 3 years and apparently noticed things I had never thought to notice about myself. I looked at the ring in his hand, small and gold and warm from being carried close to his chest for 7 months. And then I thought about walking back into that ballroom alone. About the looks I would get. About the whispers that would follow me to every conference, every department meeting, every surgery for the next year. About how Marcus, wherever he was tonight, would wake up tomorrow completely fine, while I was handed the bill for everything he'd done. "Okay," I said. Carter looked at me carefully. "Okay? Don't make me say it twice." I held out my left hand. It was shaking. He took it in both of his, and his hands were steady, and that steadiness traveled up my arm and settled somewhere in my chest. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. "Ready?" he asked. "Absolutely not," I said. "Let's go." We walked out of the coat room side by side, and I know the exact moment people started to notice because the murmuring stuttered and shifted like a flock of birds changing direction. Carter's hand found the small of my back, not possessively, not performatively, just there, solid and warm, like he'd been placing it there for years and had simply never done it in public before. Dr. Feldman stared. Priya's mouth dropped open. Jess, who had followed us out of the coat room and was now standing by the bar, looked like she was having a medical episode. Carter walked directly to the stage, took the microphone from the confused event coordinator, and turned to face the room. "Good evening." His voice filled the ballroom without effort. 300 people went still. "I want to apologize for the delay in tonight's announcement. We had a few last-minute details to finalize." He smiled that rare, careful smile I'd seen maybe 4 times in 3 years. I've never been particularly good at grand gestures. Those of you who've worked with me know I prefer precision over theater. But there are moments in life when precision isn't enough, when you have to stand in front of the people you respect most and simply tell the truth. The room was completely silent. He looked at me. Doctor, Emma Vasquez has been the finest resident I've had the privilege of training in 15 years of practice. She is brilliant, she is relentless, and she has more integrity in one shift than most people demonstrate in a career. He paused. She's also the woman I've been in love with for longer than I had the courage to admit, and I'm done letting fear make me stupid. He held out his hand toward me from the stage. 300 people turned to look at me. Jess made a sound from behind me that I would later describe as a controlled implosion. I walked to the stage. Carter helped me up the 2 steps, and when I was standing beside him, he took my left hand, the one with his mother's ring on it, and held it up just slightly, just enough for the light to catch the diamond. She said yes, he said simply. She's already mine. She just needed to know I knew it. The applause started somewhere in the back and moved forward like a wave. Cameras went up, not the gossipy kind, the celebratory kind. Dr. Chen from cardiology was actually crying. My research mentor, Dr. Okafor, was clapping so hard her bracelets were rattling. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, Carter leaned down close to my ear and said quietly, "You're going to have questions." "So many questions," I confirmed, smiling at no one in particular, at everyone in general. "Good," he said. "I have answers." The next 2 hours passed the way I imagined car accidents passed for people who walked away from them, strange and vivid, every detail crystalline. I shook hands and accepted congratulations and fielded questions with the automatic smile I'd perfected over 3 years of hospital galas. Carter stayed close, not smothering, just present, deflecting the more pointed inquiries with a fluency that suggested he'd done more advanced planning for this evening than I'd realized. Twice, colleagues asked how long we'd been together. "Long enough to know," Carter said both times, and somehow that was enough. My mother called at 9:47. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately felt guilty and called her back. "Emma Marie Vasquez," she said before I finished saying hello. "Your cousin texted me a photo. Explain yourself." "Mom, you were engaged to Marcus this morning." I was not, technically, engaged to Marcus this morning. We were planning to get engaged tonight, and he didn't show up, so I made a different decision. The silence on the other end of the line was the specific silence of a Cuban mother processing information that defied all known frameworks. "Who is this man in the picture?" she finally asked. "My boss, Dr. Carter Hayes." Another silence. "The one you said was brilliant and impossible, and you'd learned more from him than anyone?" I hadn't remembered saying that. "Yes, and he's in love with you." That's what he said. In front of 300 people, so there's not much room for him to walk it back. My mother inhaled slowly. "What happened to Marcus?" "He texted me 9 words and disappeared." "Dios mío." A pause. "Good riddance." "Mom, don't you defend him to me. I never liked him. He talked over you at Thanksgiving and I almost said something." She paused again. "This Dr. Hayes. He treats you well?" I looked across the ballroom to where Carter was speaking with the Foundation's board chairman, listening with that focused attention he gave everything, and I thought about the ring on my finger and the 7 months he'd carried it. "Yes," I said. "He does." "Then bring him to Sunday dinner," she said, like this was the natural and obvious next step. 2 weeks from now, I'll make ropa vieja." After the last guest left and the event staff began breaking down the floral arrangements, I found Carter standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up. Without the formality, he looked different. Younger in some ways, older in others. More like a person, and less like a position. "You should have been a surgeon," I said, coming to stand beside him. That was the smoothest crisis intervention I've ever witnessed. "I've been practicing," he said, without looking away from the window. Then he turned. "How are you? And I mean actually." I thought about the question honestly. My feet hurt. My heart was doing something irregular, and I would have ordered an EKG on a patient presenting like this. My fiancé of 0 minutes had left the country, and I was engaged to a man I'd been professionally afraid of for 3 years. "I don't know yet," I said. "Ask me again in the morning." Carter nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket, the same one he'd kept the ring in, and pulled out nothing, just checking, the way people do when they've been carrying something important for a long time and aren't used to it being gone. The gesture was so unguarded it made my chest ache. "Why 7 months?" I asked. "You said you'd been carrying it for 7 months. Why didn't you?" "Because you were with Marcus," he said, "and I don't do that. I don't pursue people who are committed to someone else regardless of what I feel." He paused. "And because I was afraid." "Of what?" He looked at me steadily. "Of ruining what we had. We work well together, Emma. You challenge my thinking, you push back when I'm wrong, and you do it without theater. Just facts, just honesty. That's rare. I didn't want to lose it by wanting more. And now? Now I've announced it to 300 people and put my mother's ring on your finger, so the cost-benefit analysis has shifted." I laughed before I could stop myself. He smiled, that full, unguarded smile I'd never seen at the office, and was already becoming certain I wanted to see every day. "Carter." I turned to face him. "Marcus used to tell me I was too serious, too career-focused, that I didn't know how to be soft." I looked down at the ring. "I just want you to know what you're actually getting. I work 70-hour weeks. I forget to eat. I have strong opinions about clinical protocols, and I will argue them at 7 in the morning before either of us has had coffee." "I know," he said. "You know, Emma, I've worked with you for 3 years. I've seen you at your worst post-call, sleep-deprived, furious because a supply order came in wrong at the worst possible moment. I've seen you be wrong and admit it and correct it without ego. I've seen you sit with a patient's family at 2 in the morning when you'd already been there for 18 hours because you couldn't leave them alone." He paused. "The woman Marcus described, that's not a flaw. That's who you are. And who you are is why I'm standing here." The tears came before I had time to prepare for them. Not the humiliated tears from the coat room, something different. Something that felt more like relief than grief. Carter crossed the small distance between us without rushing and handed me a handkerchief, actual cloth, pressed, monogrammed, because of course he was the kind of man who carried one. "I hate crying," I said. "I know that too," he said. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with you like this. We've always had a professional structure, and now I don't know where the lines are. We'll figure out the lines together," he said. "That's all I'm asking. Not for certainty. Not for a guarantee. Just for the chance to figure it out." I wiped my eyes and looked at him, really looked, the way I hadn't allowed myself to in 3 years of keeping every feeling professional and contained. He was good-looking in that settled, serious way that had never translated well in my brain because he was my boss, and that category had a lock on it. But the lock was off now. And what I saw when I looked without the professional filter was a man who'd spent 2 years carrying grief quietly, without letting it hollow him out, who'd carried a ring in his pocket for 7 months out of respect for my choices, who'd walked into a coat room in the middle of his own fundraiser to make sure I wasn't alone. "Okay," I said. "Okay, what?" "Okay. Let's figure it out." Something in his shoulders released, just slightly, the way a person breathes after holding something heavy. He offered his arm and I took it, and we walked out of the empty ballroom through the marble lobby and into the November air, and neither of us said anything for a while because sometimes the right thing to do is let a moment exist without putting words all over it. We had breakfast at a diner 3 blocks from the hotel because it was past midnight, and neither of us had eaten, and the kind of night we'd just survived required eggs and coffee and something ordinary to hold on to. Over scrambled eggs and 2 strong diner coffee, I found out that Carter Hayes had grown up in Portland, Oregon, that he had a younger brother named Patrick who was a high school basketball coach and would probably think this whole situation was hilarious, that he'd started running after his wife Sarah passed away, not for health reasons but because grief required somewhere to go at 5 in the morning, that his favorite food was his housekeeper, Mrs. Kim's kimchi jjigae, which she made every Sunday, regardless of whether he'd asked for it, because she'd decided it was what he needed, and she was not wrong. In return, I told him about growing up in Miami, about my mother and her bottomless capacity for both love and unsolicited opinion, about the fact that I'd decided to go into medicine at age 9 when my grandfather had a heart attack, and I'd been terrified by how little I understood about what was happening to him. "You wanted control over something that scared you," he said. "Doesn't everyone who goes into medicine?" He considered this. "Probably. What about you?" He wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "My mother had a congenital heart defect. She was told as a teenager she'd likely never see 40. She's 67 now." He paused. I wanted to be the reason someone got that kind of time. I thought about that on the walk back to the hotel, about the particular shape of other people's motivations, about how you could work alongside someone for 3 years and know their professional competency completely and still know almost nothing about what drove them. You never told me that, I said. You never asked. In what world would I have asked you that? You were my attending. I know, he said. I'm just saying now you can ask. Anything. My phone buzzed as we reached the hotel entrance. An unknown number, I answered without thinking. Emma. Marcus's voice. My whole body tensed. Carter noticed I saw it in the slight shift of his posture, the way he became very still. Marcus. I heard about tonight. His voice had that quality I now recognized as performed contrition, the tone he used when he wanted something. I saw the photos online. Emma, listen to me. I panicked, okay? I've been panicking for weeks. The Austin offer came through and it was everything I'd been working toward, and I didn't know how to tell you, so I made a mistake. I see that now. Okay, I said. A pause. Okay? That's it? What did you want me to say, Marcus? I wanted you to, yell at me. Tell me there's still a chance. Tell me this thing tonight was just to save face and we can still. I'm engaged, I said. Genuinely, legally engaged. To someone who showed up. Silence. You don't even know him like that, Marcus said, and the performed contrition was gone now, replaced by something sharper. You work with the guy. That's not real, Emma. That's just proximity. You're making a decision in the middle of an emotional crisis. I looked at Carter, who was studying the middle distance with the focused patience of a man who had learned to give people the room they needed without removing himself from it. You told me for 4 years that I was too serious, I said. Too focused on work, that I needed to learn to be softer, smaller, more available. I paused. You left me in front of my colleagues via a 9-word text, Marcus. You don't get to characterize my decisions anymore. I hung up. My hands were completely steady. Carter looked at me. Okay? Yes, I said, and meant it in a way I hadn't expected to. He called to see if there was still a door open. There isn't. Carter nodded slowly. Then he said, quietly, I want to be honest with you about something. Please. I've spent 2 years being very careful about what I let myself feel. After Sarah, He paused, choosing words the way he chose everything. Precisely. I convinced myself that the point wasn't to stop feeling things. The point was to be careful about where I put what I felt. To not give it to people who would waste it. He looked at me directly. I've been watching you for 3 years, Emma. I am not operating from proximity or impulse. I know the difference between what I felt for Sarah and what I feel for you. They're not the same shape, and I'm not trying to make them be. I'm just telling you that this is real, and that I am not going to disappear on you. I stood on the sidewalk outside a hotel at 1:15 in the morning, in a dress that cost too much and a ring that fit like it had always been mine, and I thought about all the ways a person could be seen. How Marcus had looked at me for 4 years and seen a liability, something to be managed, edited, kept smaller than it wanted to be. How I had let him because I'd mistaken his certainty for authority. And then I thought about Carter Hayes, who'd watched me from a professional distance for 3 years and apparently noticed my laugh and my work ethic, and the way I treated nurses, and the fact that I ate terrible vending machine sandwiches at 2 in the morning rather than leave a patient's family alone, who'd carried a ring for 7 months out of respect for my choices and then walked into a coat room to make sure I wasn't destroyed by someone else's cowardice. I have a terrible vending machine habit, I said. I should have disclosed that earlier. Carter's mouth curved. I'm aware. The B7 slot. Salt and vinegar chips. You noticed that? I told you. I notice things. That's either very sweet or mildly alarming. Probably both, he said. I suspect you'll find that's a consistent theme. I laughed, a real laugh. The kind that surprised me. The kind I hadn't thought I'd have access to tonight. He was watching me when I laughed, with that same expression I'd been too carefully professional to examine before tonight, the one that looked like someone seeing exactly what they came for. Sunday dinner with my mother, I said. 2 weeks from now. She's making ropa vieja and she will interrogate you and she will not apologize for it. I can handle it, he said without hesitation. She's not subtle. Neither am I. I thought about the microphone and the 300 people and she's already mine and decided he was telling the truth. One more thing, I said. Yes, the ring fits perfectly. Did you know it would? Carter was quiet for a moment. When my mother gave it to me, she told me to find someone who would wear it like it had always belonged to her. He looked at my hand. I sized it when I decided to carry it. I borrowed one of your rings from your desk drawer one afternoon when you were in surgery. I stared at him. You borrowed my ring to size it. Yes. 7 months ago. Yes, Carter. I know. That is both the most romantic and most unsettling thing anyone has ever done for me. I'm aware, he said. I chose to lean into the romantic interpretation. We stood there on the sidewalk for a moment longer, the city moving around us the way cities do at 1 a.m, all headlights and distant sirens and the particular hum of something too large and alive to ever fully quiet down. I'm not sure what we are yet, I said honestly. I'm not sure what to call this or how to explain it to people or what it looks like next week when we're both back at the hospital. We're figuring it out, Carter said. Together. That's all we have to be right now. It was enough. It was, in fact, more than I'd had in years. I took his arm and we walked back into the hotel, and somewhere across the city, Marcus was probably awake and rewriting the story he'd tell about tonight, about how I'd replaced him at my own engagement party, about the revenge narrative that would make him the underdog in his own tale. But that was his story to tell. This one was mine. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was exactly where I wanted to be, not smaller, not edited, not braced for the next thing to be taken, just standing in the middle of my own life, with a ring that fit, and a man who'd noticed me for 3 years and finally had the courage to say so. The elevator doors closed. Carter looked at the floor numbers ascending. I looked at his profile, that composed, serious face that had started, very recently, to look like something I might want to study for a long time. You know your sister is going to find out about this by morning, I said. He sighed. My brother, too. What's Patrick going to say? Carter considered. He's going to say I have terrible timing and excellent taste. That's fair. He's going to want to meet you. I want to meet him, I said, and found that I meant it. The elevator opened on my floor. We stood in the hallway, the silence between us carrying none of the awkwardness I might have expected, and all of the weight of everything tonight had become. Breakfast, Carter said. 8 o'clock. I want to talk through next steps before we're back in the hospital, and everything turns professional again. 8 o'clock, I agreed. And Carter. Yes? Thank you. For tonight. For I stopped, because there wasn't a word that fit the size of what he'd done. For not letting them have it. He looked at me for a long moment with that expression I didn't yet have a name for, but was already starting to recognize. You didn't need me to save you, he said. You needed someone to stand next to you while you saved yourself. He turned and walked back to the elevator, and I watched the doors close, and I stood in the hallway for a long moment, looking down at the ring on my left hand, small, gold, warm, perfectly fitted, carried for 7 months by a man who'd been paying attention when I thought no one was. In the morning there would be calls to make, and explanations to give, and professional logistics to untangle. My mother would have 14 opinions and deliver them all by 9 a.m. Jess would arrive at my door with coffee and a list of questions she'd been composing since 8:14 last night. The hospital would hum with it for weeks. But tonight, standing in a quiet hallway with the city lit up beyond the windows, I understood something Marcus had never managed to teach me, and Carter Hayes had shown me without trying. That being chosen, really chosen, without conditions or edits or requests to be smaller, didn't feel like rescue. It felt like finally being allowed to take up exactly the space you'd always deserved.